Hello, my name is Russell and today I'm going to give you a quick overview on RAW processing. Now, shooting in RAW is an excellent way to give you the best quality that your camera can produce. It also gives you a little bit more flexibility if you need to adjust the exposure or the white balance, say. Once you've taken your RAW images, you'll load them into Photoshop. Photoshop generally knows how to deal with them straight away, so you don't usually need to download any extra plugins or anything like that. And it'll automatically pull up the RAW processing program. At the top, you've got some basic controls for moving around, cropping, straightening, removing little bits of dust and stuff, and rotating the image. On the side here, you've got a number of different tabs. The three we're going to be using today is the basic one, which gives you control over your white balance, your exposure, and colour. The tone curve, which will give you your control over your contrast, and the sharpening one. Now, the first thing to do whenever you open a RAW image is to set the white balance. That's generally quite easy. So if you took an image in bright sun, you drop down the white balance lift and click daylight. It will automatically give you the correct colour balance. Or if you use flash, again, very similar kind of colour. Or if you're in shade, if it's cloudy, you just click that one. Sometimes it does get a little bit wrong, and you can use auto if you think that will do a better job. As you can see here, it's done quite well. For the best accuracy though, we have a tool here, which is called the white balance tool. If you click on that, and click on any part of the image which should be white, it will adjust it so it is a white colour, even if it is a bit dark. If we clicked on yellow, say, we get a very different colour, a much bluer colour. Again, click on that, and switch it back to white. As you can see, the colour temperature there is 2700 Kelvin, whereas the auto said 2850, so very close with the automatic one. Once you've set your white balance, you can then move on to the exposure. Now, if you're using a JPEG, you'd be very limited to this. You wouldn't be able to push it very far at all before Photoshop was having to invent some of the details. So here we go. You can push it quite easily down to 2.5 stops, just to get the nice bright and punchy image that it should be. Below that, you have a recovery slider. That will basically try and recover any blown out detail in highlights. So if we look at the back of the image now, if I slide that all the way up, the back of the image gets a bit darker. This is good, says you've got something that's quite reflective, and the edges of that, you've lost some detail in there that'll get a little bit back, but it's not brilliant. Again, the fill light is the opposite of the recovery. If you've got shadows, it will fill those shadows in and basically expose them a little bit more. So you can see, if you push it all the way, the peppers get lighter. As it happens though, we're quite happy with that. Beneath that, we have the black slider, which basically sets the point at which the camera thinks it should be black. If you push that all the way up, most of the image goes black. I just like further and further, darker tones slowly become just solid black. So generally, we want that number to be quite low. Generally, about 5 gives you a little bit of punch, but not too much. Beneath that is the brightness tool. Again, you shouldn't need to use this much, it just lightens or darkens the image. There you go. Contrast as well, we can increase the contrast just by sliding it, or decrease it by dropping it down. But we don't need to do any of that here. Finally, we have the colour ones. Basically, you can increase the clarity, which basically the contrast between colours. the vibrance, so how bright those colours appear, and then the saturation, so how much those colours bleed out. But we're quite happy with all those as they are. Move on to the next tab now, which is the curve tab. If you click on point, you can adjust the contrast quite easily. Medium contrast. With the strong contrast, you'll see the shape of the curve is a little bit stronger. And if you want, you can even make it a little bit stronger yourself. Push it all the way if you really want. But a medium contrast is fine for this one. The last point is your sharpening. This is usually set to about 25. But I'd say, when you're sharpening an image, leave that till you've made all the corrections and adjustments that you'll ever make, including healing any dust or just removing bits of grit that you'd rather not like on the image. So drop that down to 0 and Photoshop won't apply any sharpening. The other tabs, things like grayscale, split toning, lens corrections, different effects. You can put some grain in there, and a few just do with the camera calibration profiles. With those, you don't really want to touch those until you're in Photoshop itself. So if you want to save the image before you make any adjustments, you can do. Everything's preserved through that way. Once you're happy with that, just click Open Image. Give Photoshop a second and it will open it right up for you. So there we go. We have a nice, bright and clean image straight away. If we compare that with the JPEG, you can see it's obviously still a very dirty image. If we try and correct the colour balance, so we don't have the slider anymore. So it's easier if we went to our levels. And adjusted those individually. So you can see it's still quite difficult just to get a nice white background. If we use auto colour, it does get some of the way there. We still have quite a dark image, so if we go to exposure and we boost that, notice even after a stop we're starting to lose some of our detail. So we just click OK for now. That gives us about as far as we can get with a JPEG image. So we'll switch that back to our raw image. You can see there's a lot more detail, a lot more shadow detail at that. As a JPEG, if you look at the stalk, it's still very dark, nothing in there. Whereas on our stalk in the raw file, still a lot of detail, and the tones on the fruits themselves are much smoother rather than just being blocks of colour. So that's why raw image is much better to shoot than a JPEG. And that is a quick overview to raw processing. If you'd like to give this a go, it's very easy. Just set your camera to a raw mode. There will be a practice shot on my website. It will be this shot in fact, and that's www.russell.co.uk. If you just click on the technique section. If you have any questions you'd like to ask, feel free to email me. Other than that, thanks for watching.